All right, let's just jump right in. I want you to imagine something for a second. What if you had a perfect virtual doppelganger of your own body, a digital copy that doctors could use to test new medicines on? It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? Well, it's not. This is the wild reality of what we call digital twins, and they're about to completely change how we develop life-saving drugs. But before we get to the future, let's talk about a problem we all know. You ever wonder why it takes like a decade or even more for a promising new drug to get from a lab into your local pharmacy? It's this incredibly expensive, painfully slow process. But the key to solving this very modern problem, well, it actually starts with a crisis that happened a long, long time ago, far away from any hospital.
Yep, you heard that right. Apollo 13. The story of how we're going to speed up medicine today is weirdly and brilliantly connected to how a bunch of NASA engineers saved 3 astronauts who were stranded in space. Seriously, stick with me here, because this is one of those connections that'll just blow your mind.
Okay, so to really appreciate the solution, we first have to get our heads around the problem. The traditional clinical trial, which is our gold standard for testing new medicines, it has some major issues, some real bottlenecks that just slow everything to a crawl. And what's really striking is how all of these problems are connected. First, just finding enough of the right patients for a trial can take forever. Then, running these massive trials costs an absolute fortune. On top of that, a huge number of those people have to be in a placebo group, meaning they get a sugar pill instead of the actual treatment. But maybe the most unbelievable part. After all that time, money, and effort, all that incredibly valuable data from the placebo groups, it almost always just gets thrown away, just tossed out.
So, how in the world do you fix all of that? Well, it turns out you look to the original masters of problem-solving under pressure, NASA. The idea that's changing modern medicine was literally born during the space race.
This timeline just lays it all out so perfectly. Back in the 60s, NASA built these exact digital replicas of their spacecraft right there on the ground. So when Apollo 13 had its famous "Houston, we've had a problem" moment, the engineers on Earth used its digital twin to test out every possible solution before they radioed the instructions up to the astronauts. It literally saved their lives. Now, fast forward to today, and these twins aren't just static copies anymore. We're talking about intelligent twins, supercharged with AI that can learn, reason, and adapt all on their own.
So let's just define this clearly. What is a digital twin? Think of it as a dynamic virtual model that's constantly being fed real-world data. It's not just a blueprint, it's more like a living simulation that you can use to ask what-if questions and predict what's going to happen next, whether you're talking about a spacecraft or a patient with Alzheimer's. So how does all this space-age tech actually work in a clinical trial? Well, there's a company called Unlearn that's pioneering this, and what they're doing is really clever. They're not trying to build a digital twin of one specific person, but instead, a model of how a disease progresses in an entire population. This comparison here really gets to the heart of it. You see the old way, huge trials, huge costs, long timelines. The new way lets us run smaller, faster, and cheaper trials. So how is that even possible? Well, it's by taking all that historical data that used to get thrown in the garbage and using it to give every single participant a statistical boost. It makes the results of the study way more powerful and clear. So here's the 4-step process Unlearn uses. First, they gather up all that placebo data from old trials, basically turning digital trash into treasure. Second, they feed all that data to an AI to build what they call a digital twin generator. This thing gets incredibly good at just one thing, predicting how a patient's disease is likely to progress if they're on a placebo. Third, when a new trial starts, they generate a digital twin for every single person in the study to predict what would have happened to them if they weren't getting the new drug. And finally, and this is the magic part, they use that prediction as a baseline. It cuts through all the statistical noise, so the real effect of the new drug just pops. It stands out crystal clear, and you can see it with way fewer patients. And this right here, this is the secret sauce. Trying to predict how your body will react to a brand new, never-before-seen drug is, well, it's insanely complicated. Maybe impossible right now. But predicting how a disease would progress without that new drug, based on data from thousands of other patients, now that is a problem that AI is perfectly built to solve. It's just a much smarter way to attack the problem. Okay, so I know what you might be thinking. This sounds amazing, but is it actually safe? Are we just replacing real people with computer models here? The answer is a hard no. The entire system was built from the ground up with safety and regulations as the absolute #1 priority.
And you don't have to take my word for it. As Unlearn's founder Aaron Smith says right here, this wasn't some afterthought. They specifically engineered this whole thing to meet the incredibly tough standards of regulators like the FDA here in the US and the EMA over in Europe.
So how do they pull that off? Well, a few key ways. First, the math behind it is designed to control for the exact kind of statistical errors that regulators worry about the most, so the results are totally trustworthy. And second, and this is a big one, it focuses on the statistics of a whole group of people, not on making a life or death decision for one single patient. That makes the risk profile way, way lower. So what does this all mean for the future? What's the big takeaway here? Well, we are talking about a fundamental shift in how we discover and approve new medicines, letting us move at a speed we never thought was possible.
In the very near future, this won't be some exotic new tech. It's just going to be the standard way things are done. As Aaron Smith says, I feel like that's inevitable. Just imagine what happens when you speed up every major drug trial that's happening. The ripple effect is huge.
But the long-term dream, the big vision, that's even more profound. The ultimate goal is that our computer models get so good at predicting how a drug will work that a clinical trial becomes less about finding out if it works and more of just a final routine safety check before we get it to patients. I mean, that would change everything. And that brings us to the final and I think most exciting question of all. If this technology is really going to make drug development faster and cheaper and more efficient, what does that mean for diseases we currently consider incurable, things like Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's? When this bottleneck is finally gone, which one of those diseases will we conquer next?